Alright, let's talk about present tense regular verbs. The first thing we have to know is present indicative is another way to say present tense regular verbs. These indicate that the action or the verb is taking place right now. So by using the present tense, we're saying when this is taking place, which is now. Now we're talking regular verbs. That means they are more predictable because they follow a set of patterns. So anytime we have regular verbs, we know we can predict a pattern that's going to happen to all of these different verbs. Now talking about conjugation, this means changing the verb's ending in order to show the subject and the tense. So a subject is the noun doing the action, and the tense is when this is happening. So again, a subject is the noun doing the action. So with this penguin, the penguin eats fish. The penguin is the subject because it is the noun eating the fish. Now remember that in order to make a complete sentence, we must at the very least have a subject and a predicate, or in other words, a verb, whether it's Spanish or English. Otherwise, we'll be dealing with sentence fragments. Now let's talk about Spanish verbs. There are 3 types of infinitives, or verbs that are not conjugated yet. So an infinitive is an unconjugated verb. So our 3 types. We've got AR, ER, and IR verbs. The type is determined by the ending of the infinitive. Notice these here. Let's talk conjugation now that we've talked about types of verbs. We use the verb chart shown here as a strategy to help us conjugate. It helps us stay organized. Now when we're using this strategy, we use the subject to determine which box or ending we need to use. This is our chart, so we can see that it has many different components. Everything on the left-hand side is singular, for singular subjects. Everything on the right is plural. Then we have the rows. First person is the first row, which means you're talking about yourself. You are included. I. Second person means you're having a dialogue. You're talking directly to that person. And third person means you are talking about someone. Now each type of verb has its own endings. So let's talk AR verbs. Their endings are o, as, a, amos, ais con acento, an. So if we have the verb hablar, we would take off the ending, the AR, we're left with habl, the stem, and then we would put the stem next to all these endings. So hablo, hablas, habla, hablamos, hablais, hablan, to get our conjugated verb in the present tense, or the present indicative. Again, we got to double check all our spelling, make sure our endings match our subjects. Then we have ER verbs. So their endings would be o, es, e, hemos, eis con acento, en. A verb like comer would be a good example, ER. So again, we get rid of the ending, we're left with the stem, and we would write that next to each of these endings. Como, comes, come, comemos, comeis, and comen. Now remember, we have to memorize these endings so that way we can match them to the subjects. Lastly, we have IR verbs. A good example will be as follows. O, es, e, imos, is con acento en. So we would take a verb like escribir, get rid of the ending, and conjugate by putting the stem next to these new endings. Escribo, escribes, escribe, escribimos, escribís, escriben. Remember, although similar to ER, these have slightly different endings. Let's break down these steps to conjugate. Your first step is to determine your subject and have a Spanish infinitive that you wish to use. So like Maria could be our subject and hablar, to talk. Next, you're identifying the kind of verb. What ending does it have? Hablar ends with AR, so it's an AR verb. Write or look at a verb chart with the appropriate endings. In this case, we need an AR chart. So, o asa, amos, ice, on. Use the subject to determine which box of the chart you need. We have Maria, so we know we need third person, or third row, and singular, so it's on the left-hand side. So we will use a as our ending. Remove the verb's ending, so hablar, we're going to get rid of the AR, and that will leave us with the stem or the root. Think of a flower to help you remember. It's the part left over. Stem or a root. So we get rid of AR, we're left with hablo. Then we would add the new ending to the end of the stem. In this case, we already agreed that for Maria, we need a. So therefore, we would take it and make habla. Now we have Maria habla. Something to keep in mind when you're translating from Spanish to English is that yo hablo, for instance, has 3 different translations. It could mean I talk, it could mean I do talk, or it could mean I am talking, all in the present tense. The same thing applies for questions. So if I write hablas tú, it could be do you talk? You talk, or are you talking? So it's really important to keep these translations in mind. All verbs will have these 3, so be careful when translating. Gracias.